He's a prophet. He's a prophet and a pusher. Partly truth, partly fiction. Walking contradiction.
You saying that about me?
Well, who else would I be talking about?
Hello and welcome to Curtains and Lights, a podcast where we discuss movies immediately after watching them. Here's Jannik.
And here's Alex.
And today we're discussing Taxi Driver, a 1976 movie by Martin Scorsese and starring Robert De Niro. And there will be spoilers from here on out. Okay, so we just watched Taxi Driver, and yeah, it's quite a movie.
Well, I mean, I saw it for the first time. I didn't see it yet, and I'm kind of glad Jannik showed it to me. And let's say it was quite an experience, so I think we should get talking about this one.
Yeah, so I think, like, the first note that I wrote down, and I think you said so yourself, that the first thing you wrote down was the music, because that's...
Oh, yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Like, the music's really good about that movie. It's like that really chill jazz kind of movie. It's, like, kind of interesting, but I really enjoy it.
Yeah, and it's like... I wanted to say it catches your eye, but it kind of catches your ear, because, like, right off the bat, it starts with, like, just that smoke cloud and, like, that chill, like, downbeat jazz. It's really interesting. The score was composed by Bernard Herrmann, who also did the score for Psycho. And
okay, I have no idea what that is, but whatever. Like, I know Psycho, but I don't know the composer, but whatever.
All right, so I think this movie is pretty interesting because of its thematic implications. It talks a lot about kind of alienation and how Travis deals with that personally. He is definitely a social outcast. He comes back from the Vietnam War, doesn't have much friends besides his like colleagues that he talks to every now and then. Doesn't have any romantic connections, so he tries to change that, obviously, through the course of the film. And also, he doesn't really have anything he really believes in. He's just, he wanders around.
He's just kind of there and not really...
Yeah, exactly. He has insomnia, so he gets work at night, but he doesn't like feel fulfilled by that work. He just thinks, because he's doing it anyway, he might as well get paid.
Yeah, like one thing I've really noticed about this movie is like when I first saw like the intro sequence, like I tried drawing down, I tried drawing a timeline of this movie, but around like, yeah, like at kind of at the end, like when suddenly like Iris came in, I stopped keeping track of it because it was kind of getting convoluted, but not like in a bad way. Like while I was watching the movie, it kind of felt like weird, but now that I've actually seen the whole thing, it's actually pretty good. So yeah, it's really an experience.
So obviously, Taxi Driver has been kind of in the talk lately in like film discussion communities because of like the parallels it draws to Joker. We won't be focusing too much on the parallels to Joker here because this is really a discussion about Taxi Driver, and I don't think you've seen Joker yet.
No, I haven't seen Joker yet, but that's definitely something we can see on this podcast maybe one day.
Yeah. So just real quick, Joker talks a lot about like the material conditions that drive people insane, basically. And this is much less like about materialism. Like we understand that Travis is probably not like the richest dude or anything, but it doesn't really focus on that. It more focuses on like the psychological like alienation that happens under like a working class life, and more it's more about his need to connect to people and to be seen, and his inability to do that. So that's where the main tension comes from. So it's much less like materialistic, like Marxist, and more like Hegelian.
Okay, so I didn't see that yet, and the fun fact for behind the scenes, the actual reason we decided to watch this movie is because Jannik and I decided to watch more movies so I can get better at analyzing movies. So I didn't see any of that, to be honest, but I did see a small political section at the end, if I'm so honest. But I think that's a very good analysis, and I'm going to think about that.
Yeah.
Yeah, what I said, like kind of at the beginning, like from a cinematic point of view, I really noticed that at the beginning of the movie, you had a kind of an exposition dump, like when Robert De Niro narrated him, like the character he plays, or the character narrated the character that is, well, in the movie. And I kind of realized that it was kind of like cheesy. Like one thing I noticed about the whole movie that it was like really slow to begin with. Like I don't think it's a movie I would actually watch again, but maybe I will. And that would have been into the last section, but I just took it beforehand.
Yeah.
But that doesn't
Okay.
matter.
I was looking for a different note, but because you just mentioned that, I wrote a note down pretty early on that like the way he like writes in his diary is like extremely monotone and like kind of off. There's this one point where he says like, oh, Betsy, I should have like asked for a name, but it was like really like clinical. Like it didn't like sound like someone would actually be thinking that, but
yeah, I get that. Like from when I watched the whole movie, I kind of had that feeling the whole time that the movie was like there was something off about Travis. Like Travis, the main character.
Exactly.
We haven't seen
I
the
think
movies.
that's like representative of him like being unable to connect to people.
Mhm.
Like he like we obviously see through the plot that he is like kind of a weird guy, and he like does a lot of things that aren't like based on his internal self, but like rather based on like other people's expectations for him, and also like impressing Betsy, saving Iris, and stuff like that. And so it seems like that was what they were going for, to like make him like detached early on before he does like anything really weird. We get like a small clue, like just by the way he's like writing his diary.
Yeah, I can see that. Like one thing we should have probably said more early than now is kind of like a quick rundown of what happens in the film, or what we both experience what happens in the film.
I kind of assumed that people would have watched the movie if they're still listening.
I mean, yeah, I get that, but I would still.
Yeah, we can.
Sorry to interrupt you again, but not for the point of actually repeating to like the outside viewer what has happened in the movie, but like from what our perspective, like what was
right. So I'm gonna get like a rundown of the film and what I think it means. So Travis Bickle is a taxi driver who's a Vietnam War vet, who main struggle in life is to connect to other people and to self-actualize. He's very much on like lives on a day-to-day basis. He doesn't really feel like his life has any meaning, and he wants to change that first by impressing this girl Betsy, who he thinks of as attractive, and he asks her out to a date. And obviously, he goes with her to a porn theater, which is another like
slide tangent. It's like one of these. It's like the one scene that just raises so many questions. Like you said it while we were watching the movie, but like the porn scene is just weird. It's just really weird.
Yeah, I'm gonna get to that, to the movie itself later. That they're like just the act of like going to a porn theater is like shows his like social ineptitude in some ways.
Oh yeah, he's really social inept.
And then after she cuts him off, he first like is like really insistent that she will feel better and he has another chance. There's this one scene where he's on the telephone with her, and the camera like pans to an empty corridor, and it just keeps like showing nothing, and he keeps talking. So I think that kind of shows like we all know that it's over with him and Betsy, but he like just keeps on talking.
One thing I wrote down, like one thing I thought was really odd about, like I haven't yet made my mind up if it's a good or a bad thing, but there's like so many parallel stories going off at the same time. Like for example, there's the Palantine. I actually noted it during the movie that Palantine kind of sounds like Palpatine. It's like the presidential candidate. if I got that correctly, who's a member of he's in the Senate, but he wants to be a president. If that's
Yeah.
what I got correctly. He's kind of a Bernie Sanders, I realized during the movie. But whatever, like there's like that story going on, and like I just wanted to say, sorry, and like what was her name again? Betsy is like a volunteer for him, and yeah, it's really odd because even though the thing with Betsy is over, we still kind of get back to Palantine then and again. But at the same time, there's like that story that like especially at the end of the movie that Travis wants to be like a crime fighter in a way.
Yeah. So I think like all of these things, like even when he like turns to like helping Iris, it's not really about like I don't know, like his morals or utilitarianism, but mostly about like he wants to be like doing something about his life. He doesn't just want to like live and like work day to day. He wants to he wants to like improve others' lives to like kind of like prove himself as someone and who is seen, and he kind of works. It kind of works out because in the end, there's like a lot of reporters who document the story, and he talks to Betsy in the final taxi scene, which may or may not be real, but what it symbolizes is kind of that he's finally seen by Betsy because he finally made that breakthrough because he got seen by all those reporters.
Yeah. One thing I realized about the movie was like there's a lot of scenes that don't bear any significance to the story, but are just kind of there. And that's one of the points I wrote down. Like, let me quickly find it. Where is it? Oh yeah, right. I kind of wrote down like it's kind of odd to describe, but I kind of feel like the movie kind of tracking Travis's life and the story that the movie wants to convey, but it kind of doesn't leave out the uninteresting parts, like that are not significant to the story. Like at first, like when my very first impression while I was during the scene was like, okay, this is just boring. Can we get back to the story?
Right.
But now I realize that like a lot of things happen in these scenes. Like for example, like with his taxi driver colleagues, where the taxi driver colleagues have that weird racist discussion in a way. Like at first I just thought like, okay, it's not relevant to the story, it's boring. But now I actually think it's kind of interesting because there's a lot to be taken apart about these kinds of scenes.
Yeah. That's the next thing I actually want to talk to. How Travis is sort of radicalized by not like by one moment, but by like multiple things in his environment. Like this might be very like interpretative from my point of view and not really like be intended. Mm-hmm. But I feel like he kind of the movie kind of shows like how people like turn kind of right-wing extremists, because at first he's just like dissatisfied with New York. He talks a lot about like scum on the streets.
Yeah, there's a really good quote I wrote down. Like at some point really early in the movie, he says all the animals came out at night, and
yeah, so that's like not really like extremely conservative, but it's kind of like
it's a red flag in a way.
It's kind of a red flag, but like we can see that all these problems are caused by the extreme poverty and not really like by the people themselves. Like Travis obviously doesn't have that insight, and what like further radicalizes him is at the talks with his colleagues at the taxi driver station, because they're very casually sexist and racist, which sort of like normalizes that sort of thinking.
Yeah, I know what you mean. Like one thing I really realized about the movie was like in the end, I don't want to say Law and Order because Law and Order is like a series in of itself, but like he was kind of like the more you get to the end of the movie, the more Travis was representing that Law and Order mentality. Like by we already know there like if you got to this point, you already know there are spoilers right now, but small spoiler anyway. Like spoiler anyway. In the end, he shoots a lot of like not mafia bosses, but like mafiosi. Is that a word? Yeah, right. like mafia.
Yeah,
Like
more
people.
like sex trafficking
Yeah,
ring,
it's like a
not
sex
really
trafficking ring, and it's kind of really strange in a way.
Yeah. So like another thing that another scene that I assume was that doesn't really like add anything to the plot in a traditional sense, but I think like was representative of his radicalization when there was a passenger in his car that talked about like a racist revenge fantasy where he talks about how his wife is cheating on him with a black
Oh
guy.
yeah, like the scene where the N word is being said. You mean that one?
Yeah, he uses the N word and he like really emphasizes like exponentially worse that she's cheating on him with a black guy. So that and the sexist like taxi driver talk, I think like kind of radicalizes him in one, and those two like sentiments crescendo into like two different aspects. So the sexism aspect crescendos in kind of that he sort of becomes an incel. Like that wasn't a term back then, but he like
I wouldn't say he's become an incel. Like I can see a train of thought, but I wouldn't say quite he's become an incel because if he would have become an incel, like I think if he would have actually become an incel, he would have blamed like the prostitute or like Iris in that case instead of shooting the people around her.
well, no, well he I mean like in terms to Betsy, he like blames her for like his very obvious like social missteps and like he thinks it's her fault for them not being together, even though from our perspective it's very clearly his fault. And that the racism kind of crescendos in that scene where he shoots like a black robber of a convenience store.
Yeah, like one thing I really like this was like I'm not really good at analyzing movies, and that's kind of the point where this podcast, or at least the behind the scenes out of universe explanation, if that's the word, but like yeah, that was one of the scenes where it was like not on the nose, but like it was palpable that it was like like not supposed to be, but it was palpable that can be interpreted like an anti-racist way.
And once again, Travis like doesn't shoot that person to actually like better the situation around him. He shoots him for like to feel virtuous because he thinks like these are the people who are bringing like crime into the neighborhood.
Yeah, exactly.
If you shoot these people, the problem goes away, and that's kind of like his virtue ethics that goes into that.
Which is actually kind of a funny thing because there's that scene and around about the middle, if not shortly before the middle of the movie, where he buys all those guns and the holsters and whatnot. And I think like from there on, he's kind of like become like a violent gun addict in a way. And I think it's really interesting because I think that part of the movie can actually be interpreted in a way like against guns' right, which is kind of interesting because I kind of get it. And even though I'm like an anti-authoritarian leftist, and so are you, I, at least for my part, I'm against guns' right. And well, it's not a secret to you, but like for the viewers, that's new. And I think it was really interesting.
I think it's not necessarily about guns' rights, but when he purchases the guns, it's very clear, like it's not for his protection or to like constitute actual change, but he's like out to like do something violent. He like shoots the guy. He's very ready to shoot Palantine, and then he shoots all the people in the sex trafficking ring. Like it becomes like very like spontaneous, immediate actions of violence.
Yeah, he becomes really impulsive in a way, and I think the movie captures it really good. Like if I'm serious with you, okay, let's keep this to like let's keep that to the end of the movie, but to the end of this podcast. Sorry, but like I kind of feel like even though I didn't like the movie like as a watching experience, I think it was like a really interesting thing because it can be taken apart really good. So.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, yeah, like the Palantine scene was like one of the scene like I didn't get because like at some point during the movie my brain just phased out for like 5 minutes and then I didn't get like I just missed some important stuff and I was kind of confused for a while, but then I got it back and like
yeah. Well, the Palantine scene is like obviously if he's like a terrorist like a martyr.
Yeah, like I wasn't sure
or
if he was
whatever.
there
He
to
thinks
shoot
of himself.
Palantine or Betsy. Like I wasn't sure at that moment.
To shoot Palantine, but like he wants to like become like recognized because like he feels like he's not being heard by like either Betsy or Palantine, right? Like Palantine is just this guy who like says stuff to get elected, and Betsy is the woman who wouldn't want to be with him. So he feels like the need to like violently lash out against like that repression of being understood or being seen.
Yeah, he really becomes oh god, difficult word. Authoritarian in a way. Like not in a way, but like very obviously, like not on the nose, but like really good. And I really enjoyed that.
So there are like two people I've kind of thought about. Wait, there's another thing I that really connects to what you just said. Because like a lot of times these people who are like disaffected by the powers that be and like sort of the economic conditions, they get like portrayed as like left-wing terrorists or agitators. Yeah. There's a quote by Emma Goldman.
Who's Emma Goldman?
That I would like. She's a famous anarchist of the 20th century. I would like to read to you. Wait a second.
Yeah, like one slight tangent. Like I wrote down, like one of my notes, a sudden genre shift at about 1 hour into the movie, but in retrospective, I have no idea what I meant. Like I can't remember. I think that was around about the scene where the black guy was shot in the convenience store. Like the movie suddenly got a lot more like, I don't know, like the beginning of the movie has like that really, I don't want to say boring, but like mundane feel to it. It just starts off like any movie, but then like it suddenly starts, and it's like it's a bit similar to Parasite in a way, I think, because like at the beginning, Parasite kind of doesn't have like a real story, and it's the same thing with that movie. It doesn't have a real story, but then it takes off.
Parasite in this. We're not spoiling Parasite in this podcast, though.
Yeah, it's probably Parasite is a good movie. Go watch it. Absolutely.
So Emma Goldman lists like a couple assassinations that politicians at the time, and then after listing them, she said that every one of these men not only made known to the world as spoken or written statements showing the cause that led to his act, proving that the unbearable economic and political pressure, the suffering and despair of their fellow men, women, and children prompted the act, and not the philosophy of anarchism. So that quote like kind of says that these people aren't like anarchists in the traditional sense that they're like that like anarchism like radicalized them, or like whatever leftism radicalized them. What more radicalized them is like the poor conditions they have to live in, and they are to blame for those terroristic acts.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Like unfortunately, during the making of this podcast, like right now, today is 22nd of February. Like, okay, it's early in the morning, but it's still 22nd of February. But yeah, it's kind of like with the current political climate, especially in our home country, Germany, like there's been a shooting like 2 or 3 days ago, like in Hanau, with 11 deaths. And yeah, it kind of show, and like the way the like parties react to it really show that people don't get radicalization, like not at all.
Yeah, exactly. And that was also like a person who was like very far right and thought that like Germany was like poisoned by certain people, and that he needed to like clean Germany from them. So it is a lot like Taxi Driver is kind of like a character study of a right-wing terrorist, and like what creates a right-wing terrorist.
Yeah, but one thing I really found out about it is in the end that he wasn't actually like incarcerated or anything, but in fact he was celebrated as a hero, and I thought that was kind of shocking because that's kind of actually what happens. Like for example, like here in Germany we have that political party AfD, and Yeah, like whenever something like that happens, you can really realize that they don't see shooting like immigrants, or not even immigrants, but like German citizens that just happen to have like roots in migration. Like basically all the people that were shot in that night, I believe it was a shisha bar. Um, yeah, all of them were, I believe, German citizens, but they had like Turkish parents or something. And like you can really
Turkish and Kurdish.
Turkish and Kurdish. Yeah, and you could really
Yeah.
see in the way, like, especially how the party AFD, which is like, I don't even want to say right. They're basically a far right party at this point. Um, yeah, how they reacted to it, because they didn't react to it in a way as like he's like a bad guy and should not be trusted, but they instead said, like, they didn't say anything about his ideology and said, let's keep ideology about it. He was a crazy person. But at the same time, if like a Muslim or something, a Muslim shoots somebody, then they say it's part of the Muslim ideology and not like a crazy person doing it. And it really shows how they see, like, in a way, they heroify it in a way, if you know what I mean.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and it kind of shows like how, and the movie really shows it how like the general populace kind of does the same thing in a way. Although currently in Germany, like I would say the mainstream is currently going more left in Germany.
Yeah, which is definitely a good thing.
Fantastic.
Another slight break in topic, or I guess going back to an earlier topic, we talked about like very weird in his interactions and doesn't really know how to connect to people. So we talked about the porn thing.
Yeah.
And one of the quotes he said after that to justify himself is that he doesn't really know much about movies, which is a weird thing, because like even if you don't know much about movies,
like you kind of know that you don't take out a lady to a on the first date. Like,
it's like a very second thing is he also like only listens, like the only time we hear or see him listening to music is after he buys music that Betsy mentioned. So we also like assume that he doesn't really have a connection to like general like popular music, and he only like he obsesses over this this one song because someone because Betsy mentioned it, but he wouldn't like generally know what is going on with music. And also he's like, he's obviously political, but he claims to be apolitical.
Yeah, but he's
like
not like, I wouldn't say
points.
like he's political in like a classic sense of like he's interested in politics, but he has like a really strong opinion that just it's a far right opinion, like immigrants or people of color or whoever who's not the straight white male is bad, right? And one thing, like, yeah,
exactly. But he says that he doesn't follow political issues to Betsy, like at the very beginning.
Yeah, no, he doesn't say it to Betsy. He says it to
her coworker.
No, he says it to Palantine actually. In the cab, he says it to Palantine.
Oh yeah, he first says it in the office, like in the campaign office, but then also later says it to Palantine in the cab.
Exactly.
He says it multiple times in the movie, and yeah, there's also a quote from pretty early on in the movie that I wanted to highlight. I don't believe one should devote their life into morbid self-attention. So there we like really can see like what is important to him. He really like wants to be like recognized and also recognize other people. He doesn't want to feel isolated, but he does currently feel isolated, and that's why he doesn't he isn't satisfied with his life right now.
Yeah, exactly.
And
sorry, you go ahead.
Yeah, this is what the German philosopher Hegel talked about.
I have no idea about Hegel because you need a diploma to even understand what he said.
Okay, so the basics of the Hegelian dialectic is
just a small side tangent, but it never ceases to amaze me how you can just like you've got that big hat of philosophers, you just pull out and just act like it's the most normal thing in the world to talk about these philosophers. Like what was the other one? Albert Camus?
Well, yeah, Camus is like very famous though.
I have never heard about him before you before you told me, but that's probably because I'm not really, because I don't come from a household where like philosophy was really a thing. Like both of my parents are more like of a nature science type, but
Yeah.
I'm currently at university. I'm studying like a nature science, so it's not kind of my
Yeah.
usually.
So okay, but
Yeah.
one of the basic ideas of
Yeah.
Hegel is that like without recognition, like basically every human experience is based on like recognition of the, like you need something that is other than you, that sees you, to you yourself experience something.
To what?
To you yourself experience something. Like if no one sees you, you feel isolated and you can't experience life like you like normally would.
Yeah.
So that is like kind of the basic like character flaw, I guess, or like character motivation of Travis, like the very basic part.
Yeah. Yeah. One thing I wanted to say, I don't know if you're you want to. Oh yeah, right. Sorry. One thing I wanted to say earlier on was about oh god, I lost track. It's kind of difficult keeping track of thoughts at like 12:50 a.m. But whatever. Yeah, like the one thing I said, like one thing that the movie doesn't directly say, but I think can be nevertheless like read out of it is, or read seen. I don't know what's the correct term for it, but I'm just gonna say read. Is that instead of like frowning upon people that are like social outcasts, sorry, social outcasts, like we should instead like embrace them in order to prevent them from radicalizing to the far right.
Yeah, we should definitely improve their conditions, which like especially from this movie includes things as like personal interaction with them, like because as I said, like this movie doesn't obviously it is about class kinda, but it doesn't really talk about the side of it. It more talks about the alienation side of it.
I think this movie is not like if you know the political compass, like there's like a left to right and authoritarian to libertarian, and I think like for example the movie Parasite, in my opinion, like thematicizes more like the left to right axis, while this movie like in a long like in a big margin thematicizes like the libertarian to authoritarian frame a lot more than the left to right frame.
Yeah, I guess so. Right. Another time where he is obviously isolated from social life is like the very famous scene where he stands in front of the mirror and like shows off his gun and is says like, "You're talking to me." It's like a very like tough persona. Like he sees himself as this vigilante who would
like a typical like a cliche Reddit "I am very badass" kind of person.
Yeah, exactly. Like or like an action hero or something.
Yeah, but like
superhero. Yeah, but like obviously the real interaction doesn't play out that way. It's again like pretty awkward when he shoots the pusher, and
when he shoots who? Sorry.
The drug pusher and the sex trafficking guy. Played by Harvey Keitel, but I forgot the character. Yeah, but like in front of that mirror, he's like very he thinks he like he puts on this persona that is not really him.
Yeah.
And that is like an
Oh yeah, right. Sorry, what I wanted to say is like earlier you like that really like the very famous scene of the movie. It's kind of funny because you said that because I've never even heard of that movie before now. Like if you know anything about me, like I'm not the movie kind of guy. Like the only kind of movies I occasionally watch is like the occasional action movie that runs in the general television, right? But yeah, so I think it's kind of good that this podcast exists so I can see more movies, and you do too, because next week you basically already know what I've got planned for next week, but let's not take that away.
Yeah.
Yeah, right. Like something completely different. The one thing we haven't talked about yet is like the cinematography of the film. Like right now we've only like taken it apart like how it can be analyzed in a political way. But I think one way we should also take it apart in is like a way of like the cinematography because like this movie like on a cinematographic point of view like I love it. Like this is so good. Like there's so many good scenes. Like even though if you don't get the direct connection to the scene itself, it just looks good. You know what I mean? But
I feel like the scenes that like take place inside of the cab where it's like very rainy and the colors kind of wash into each other, they kind of reflect like Travis's like his disdain for the city. It's like very like seedy. It's like it looks pretty, but it doesn't like look nice. Like it doesn't look wholesome.
yeah, I
Um,
get what you mean. Like it's kind of I know it's kind of like a bad thing to explain. Like it's really like you can't really explain it because it's really clunky. But I really get what you're trying to say.
yeah, exactly. And
Like it looks really
like
pretty. Like the thing you're wanting to say is like you catch the unprettiness in a really pretty way. That's what you want to say, right?
yeah, exactly. And like the way it's like very rainy, and like that kind of adds to like the kind of dirty like feeling. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Like one thing I think is really funny about it is like not funny, but like I think the scene with the rain kind of looks like if you've seen it like in Threat Level Midnight, that one scene where Scott or Michael Scarn tries to drive the car in the rainy weather. Like that's what like it's the same general idea, although this movie like Taxi Driver, like it actually gets the job done really good.
Wait, what scene do you
Like I
mean?
once
Where does he drive a car?
in Threat Level Midnight where Michael Scarn sits in the car and uh, where Michael Scarn is sitting in the car and he's pretending to drive while he's having that weird narrated bit over it.
Oh, yeah, I guess so. I
But
mean,
like Taxi
uh,
Driver actually gets it done in a really good way.
parts of like Threat Level Midnight, this is like not film noir, and so is kind of Taxi Driver in like the aesthetic of
Yeah, I
it.
mean it's not
Um,
like a classic film noir story, but it's like it kind of got like the
yeah,
cinematography kind of reminds me of, even though I've never
yeah,
actually
the
seen a film noir. But
cinematography and like the general themes, but obviously like the actual plot is like very untypical for a film noir because it's a cab driver. It's not like a suave detective. It's like a very socially inept cab driver, which is kind of the opposite. Um, so um, let's talk about Iris.
Iris was the
Um,
second part of the movie where my brain kind of, not my brain, where I kind of phased out for a bit because a slight critique of the movie, in my opinion, is that it's kind of slow. Like,
I actually disagree with
you
this.
do?
I
Okay.
think I think the
Uh-huh.
pacing is not like slow, but it's very untypical. Like
Uh-huh.
scenes like don't like smoothly transition. It's just like a scene ends like kind of like early, and then the next scene already like starts like kind of late. You know, it's like
Yeah, I get what
um,
you're saying.
it's not like a smooth like once again Parasite is like very smooth from
Yeah, but I think I preferred like I'm not trying to spoiler Parasite or anything because like I'm gonna say it again. I said it earlier, but I'm gonna say it again. Watch that movie. It's good. But like I prefer the way Parasite did it because I don't know, but um like the movie Taxi Driver, it kind of does it like there's something off about it. Like some people like it. Like I know there's like intuitive and reflective opinion, but like my intuitive opinion about this is like it's too slow for me. Like it's at some point it just left me like not bored, but like either wondering what's going on or just having the scene hang for too long. Like I get that it can be there for the effect, but for me it just was not enjoyable
yeah
at some point.
like for me it had like the effect of like adding like kind of off vibe. So I think I really like the pacing.
Okay.
Okay, so let's talk about Iris.
Yeah, we can do that.
So Travis like is very obsessed with saving Iris. Once again, he is not like he doesn't want to like generally change the system or anything, but like very like in saving this one person from the situation, even though there are like a lot of other people in the same situation. I think that is like part of his like strive towards self-actualization. Like not only that he's seen, but that also that he like does something that isn't just like for mundane survival, but for something like higher.
Yeah.
Like, do you know Maslow, the psychologist?
Yeah, I know like the Maslow pyramid, but I don't know like Maslow himself.
Well, I'm talking about the Maslow.
Oh, that's good because
so like the highest, so like the lowest part is like survival,
like food, water, and whatever.
Like safety. Like lowest is like very basic stuff like food, then safety, then should like also like recognition and like togetherness, and above all that is like self-actualization that you don't like necessarily need, but
like it's definitely good to
that fulfills like your true self. Like for example, art or like a political like campaign or something or whatever, like something that you do because you believe in it.
Hobbies, like it can be simplified to the term,
but like
hobby.
kind of higher than hobby. Like in a way, it's because like it's really like actually important. It's fun.
Yeah, like not like hobby, but like
an occupation.
Yeah, like I would roughly translate it with the German word Bestimmung, like your life Bestimmung.
Yeah, purpose.
Like I can't really translate it properly, but it's like occupation.
Purpose, right?
Huh?
Purpose.
Purpose, exactly. Like for example, like for a friend of mine,
you're driving
like
force.
for example, for a friend of mine, and in a certain way for me too. Even though he's not like I'm very political, I think, or like not very political, but I think I'm political, and well, he isn't. But like for example, his occupation is like he wants to go storm chasing one day, and that's like his big dream he wants to do, and like the big dream in your life, right? Yeah, exactly. And I'm not sure if this is too shoehorned in, like with interpretation. Like sometimes I feel like some interpretations are like shoehorned in, like for example, like the curtains are blue, and your teacher wants to hear from you that he was depressed because the curtains are blue, like something like that. I'm not sure if I'm leaning myself too far out of the window here, but I think it can be really interpreted in a right-wing way of how he, instead of helping the many, he helps the few. Like, for example, he just helps Iris instead of actually tackling the problem, which is like sex trafficking, right? And I think it's kind of like, I don't know if this is too far of a stretch here, but like I think like a lot of right-wing people, instead of like relying on actual evidence, like they go like on anecdotal tangents, like, you know what I mean? Like, I hope you get my point. It's really clunky the way it explained it, because this is the first time I'm actually talking about for such a long time, and I'm sure this whole podcast is really clunky, but it's the first episode, so whatever.
Yeah, we'll figure it out along the way.
Absolutely. Did you get my point, though? More importantly.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, like they don't focus on the big picture. They just focus individual accounts because they I don't know, because like people have empathy, and with people with empathy, it's like easier to connect to like individual stories than to like hard statistics, even though the hard statistics might
be actually more relevance.
Might actually be more relevant. So also, and this is another side note to the wants to be seen struggle. He wants to talk to her like in a restaurant and not like in that room, because he also like actually like wants to have a real conversation that's like leveled and doesn't, because if he pays basically for just talking to her, that's not again like the Hegelian thing. That's not a real conversation. The people have to be leveled for you to see them as a subject, and in return for them to see you as a subject.
Yeah, I know. Like, it's like what Hegel's talking about is like that weird off feeling that you get when you talk to someone and you're like the only person that's talking, really.
Right.
Yeah, I know that. Like, I get that.
Or like, for example, if you're like having a speech and people are in the audience, you're not really having a conversation. Like,
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Sorry, I'm just eating right now because.
Yeah, I'm eating too.
Yeah, no, like the thing is like for example, we were having a like I would say we were having an equal conversation but like if you would be just sitting here or if I would just be sitting here and just talking to our microphone, that's like I get it's fun for
Yeah.
some people, but like it's not like a real conversation in a way.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. That's what our audience is done for. um, then this is like a very small side note. I don't really know if this is relevant, but I just wrote it down. He like Travis also says like from what he's seen, the communes don't look that clean, which again like shows like his kind of obsession with everything like being clean. Like also in the beginning, he like says like somebody should wash all the scum from the street. Like that washing sounds like very much like he regards these people as actually like dirt.
Yeah,
right.
Like at first, I actually thought like the movie. Sorry, you go ahead. You go ahead.
Yeah. So like that obsession with being clean and like society being clean seems also like generally kind of like fascist authoritarian stuff.
Right.
and also oh yeah, obviously communes are like pretty left wing.
Yeah.
So for him to say they don't look that clean sounds again like he kind of sees them as like not pure because he's like kind of like not like a true like full-on fascist, but like kind of fascist.
Yeah, exactly. That was exactly the word I wanted to use. Like one thing that you just said to me, like even though I didn't see it in the movie, but now that I think about it because of what you said, I really think about it too. Is that like a lot of right-wing people, and especially this movie really conveys that message, in my opinion, that right-wing people are not actually which also kind of blends in with the message of they're more cared about like individual like destinies instead of like the big picture. Is that the movie really conveys that right-wing people are not actually they don't actually like really care about what is like good for the community, but rather what looks good to the other communities about your own community. Like that, like it's more about the looks, if you know what I mean.
Yeah. Another thing I wrote down because we talked about self-actualization. Wait, where did I write this down? At some point he says like this is like another scene where he's in an apartment and we hear his voiceover for the diary entries that he's doing too much sitting, which again like for me kind of symbolizes like he's just like roaming around. He's doing his job. He's like he has like enough money to like sustain himself at least. He has an apartment. He's not homeless.
And he can afford himself to buy lots of guns. So.
Yeah, exactly. So, but he's like still doing too much sitting. He's not like actually doing something like self-actualizing himself. He's still like just like at this point he feels like his life is kind of meaningless at this point, and he needs to do something.
Sorry to interrupt you real quick, but I think that's like there's like not like an uncanny valley, but like a depressed valley between like when you're like too poor, you're too busy to be depressed really, but like and when you're rich enough, you can just do anything you want really, so you're not really depressed. But like there's that really weird valley where you're not really rich enough to actually do something, but you're not poor enough to be worried about it constantly either. So you just have like a lot of dead time, and I think he really fits into that niche. No, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah. No, I just said
No, because before you said that you wanted to say something, and I just said you couldn't go ahead with that.
Yeah. So I think I covered all the main points that I wanted to say. I just have like a few that I just like forget to like connect to any like grander points. For example, in the cab ride, Palatine, or Palatine, is it with an N or without?
I think it's Palantine, like Palan.
All right. So he like
he really sounds like Palpatine.
He talks to his colleague, I guess, or to his future vice president or whatever, his running mate. That he talks about like limos and like how they shouldn't have gotten a cab and they probably should have gotten a limo. But when he realizes that Trav is like a fan, or like at least he says he's a fan, he like shifts immediately to like, yeah, I've learned a lot from like riding cabs, way more than I've ever learned from riding limos, which like it doesn't really connect to any like larger theme of, but it is kind of like a statement of like how politicians say whatever to get elected to like
like not sure if that's
for like and shift like their not their policy, but like they shift
their public image.
Their persona depending on who they're talking to.
Yeah, I don't know if it's too much of a stretch, but this can be like in a really broad sense. I think this can be interpreted like as a fundamental flaw about representative democracy, because instead of actually talking about what's good for the people, the representants, like the people representing the people, well,
the representatives.
The representatives, thank you. Like the representatives are more interested in investing their own power, like, or in keeping their own power rather than actually, right? And even though I know it's kind of a stretch, but I think that scene shows it actually. Or is it really that much of a stretch?
It's not really. So like the one last thing I have in the notebook, I don't know where to put it, but like, so the actual movie they watch in the porn theater is like really fucking weird.
Yeah.
It doesn't seem like actual porn. It's like very, it's like a documentary on like human sex. It's like really, like it seems like a nature documentary, but like for humans, which is like,
yeah, it's really strange.
It's very odd. And I don't really know why it's there and why it is like that.
Like, there's nothing really that can be interpreted. It's just weird.
Also, one last thing. I personally think the scene where the letter of Iris's parents is read out loud is kind of unnecessary, because like,
you really?
What
like,
that scene shows,
I said like a lot of times. Actuality, okay, yeah, I can speak really good. Like I said, like in the middle of the movie, I zoned out for a bit, and that scene made me get the movie again.
All right, so I think I got like the right after his revenge act,
and I think it kind of tied together how like right-wing terrorists are like worshipped by a certain kind of the.
I think it's kind of on the nose though, because like, okay, first we already see like a lot of after it happens, so it's already implied that he's seen and recognized. And then later on in like the last scene of the movie, where he has Betsy in the cab, he also like specifically talks about how they reacted, like they and she also reacts that way, like he's a vigilante, right?
He's a what?
Like he's a hero. He's like a hero.
Okay.
So I think like the scene that comes directly before the letter and the scene that comes directly after the letter like show in like a kind of way better, like exactly the things that are shown in that scene, in my opinion.
I wouldn't say that it's very on the nose though. Like maybe for you, because like you have a lot of experience talking about movies, you would I think you would say it's on the nose, but like for like the normal populace, which I don't know if I have the authority to represent the general populace while watching movies, but I'm just gonna say, at least for my part, I think was actually a really good analogy. Because I think like the general populace, after watching this movie, they won't think too much about it. I think we're really taking this apart at this point. Like that's not a bad thing. I just think we are.
Right. And you don't like have to like say you represent the populace or anything. You represent like we just talk our opinions. Like art is subjective.
Yeah, exactly.
Do you have anything more to say about the movie for me?
Let me see. Yeah, one thing like that wasn't like nearly as strange as like that porno movie in the cinema. Like, okay, it was the 70s. Like, obviously you're gonna have porn in cinemas because apparently that was a thing in the 70s, but whatever. Like one really weird thing was like the scene where they were in the diner at 4 p.m. That one thing where they kept pointing out, "Hey, I've seen you. Can we go into the diner at 4 p.m.?" Like when they were in the diner, that was really fucking weird. Like it wasn't bad or anything, but it was like weird.
Wait, what do you mean? What was weird? Like his social interactions, or just that they went into a diner?
The social interaction, like especially on Travis's, aka Robert De Niro's side, like it was really authentically weird. Although at times it was a
Yeah,
bit on the nose, I think, although it was good. Like I enjoyed it. And one last thing I kind of want to say about the general aesthetic of the movie is like it really oozed that 1970s-ness feel.
yeah. It has like kind of that like downtown New York kind of like not like kind of dirty, kind of like aestheticized feel like of New York,
Yeah,
you know.
it's not like the like many movies as
And like
Hmm?
the music also really adds to
Oh yeah,
that.
like that was the very
Like
first thing we talked about, but let me say it again. The movie of the movie, exactly. The music of that movie is really good.
yeah, and it like really adds a lot of like the score doesn't play constantly. Like there's a lot of scenes without the, but most of the scenes that have like very prominent use of the music are the scenes where he just is driving around in the cab,
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
So
Especially at the
a
beginning
lot
of
of
the
the
movie.
scenes,
Like there's like that's yeah.
yeah, and also at the end though. So like a lot of scenes where we see like the aesthetic we talked about with like the rain and like the colored lights that like flow into each
Mhm.
other um is really like is often like paired with the music of like the
Yeah, right.
kind of like smooth but like kind like it's kind of like nice but also kind of uncomfortable.
Yeah, right. Like
Yeah.
one thing, even though like the movie is completely tonally different from the Taxi Driver movie that we just saw, but like the general thing that even though the movie is older than Taxi Driver, I think the movie is from the 60s, I'm gonna name, but like that really reminds me of the general aesthetic and like the music and so on is like The Odd Couple. Like it really reminds me of The Odd Couple.
Okay, I haven't seen that, so
It's like a comedy, but like it's a really good comedy. I love it.
oh, so it's set in New
It's
York.
set in New York too, yeah.
That's what. All right. And it also like shows like the same like kind of rainy downbeat feeling,
Yeah, it has like
or
yeah. Let me just like even though this is not about this that movie, but like the premise of the movie is some guy trying to kill himself and not being able to because he's kind of whiny. But that's basically
all right.
and it really gets that aesthetic of like the whininess across or like the raininess and the beating down and like especially the music is also that kind of jazz.
Yeah.
Like one of my
Okay.
favorite pieces of film score is actually from The Odd Couple and has like the similar tune so to it. So
All right. I think that's it
yeah, now
for our first movie discussion.
we still got to talk about like the final opinion that we lined out.
Right. But that's it for the main part, and we'll see you right back.
Okay, so now to the final part of this podcast, to our conclusion. We're gonna have two different conclusions because, well, we're two people, and yeah, like I'm gonna start because Yannick started with the other part, and I think the movie was okay. Like, I think like from an interpretatory standpoint of view, I don't know if that's a word, but I hope I get the message across. Like from what can be read out of the movie standpoint, I think the movie was really good because we talked a lot about it and we picked it. I think we really took it apart in a political way and I think it was good. But like from an actual movie point of view, I don't think I would watch it again because for me personally, it was not a bit, but actually like a lot too slow. But I already touched on that earlier, so I'm not going to go into too much depth here. But I think yeah, that it was too slow for my taste. Although the cinematography was really good, I think in the end I'm going to give it about like maybe a 6 or a 7 out of 10.
All right. So this is my, I think, third time. It could be the fourth time, but anyways, it's been kind of quite a while since I've last watched this movie, and last time that I saw it, I obviously thought about like the theme of him like needing to be seen. So that was not really new for me. What I started thinking about way more is about his road to self-actualization and how like the conditions like kind of alienate him from his fellow person. I obviously really enjoyed this movie, and I think I'm gonna give it either a 9 or a 10. I had it at a 10 before. I think I'm still gonna stick to that 10. And yeah, it's not the classic like rewatchable movie like the one like you watch like every few months, but in general, it's a good movie to rewatch. Let some time pass in between the viewings, and
I don't know. Like, sorry to interrupt you again, but to add to my conclusion earlier, I think like there's like two different kinds of movie. Like the movie you watch where you just want to be entertained, and like a movie where you think about it. And this movie is definitely one of the think about it. Like for example, even though like it's an absolutely amazing movie and I absolutely love it, like Star Wars, for example, is more like the I want to be entertained movie. Although it can be taken apart too. But like I think when I'm just like at home after like university, so this wouldn't be like the typical movie I would watch. Although it's
obviously like the perfect movie experience depends on the context, and this is like definitely a movie you have to sit down and want to like engage with. This is not just like a fun movie to like throw on just enjoy yourself or relax.
Yeah, exactly.
So obviously we disagree on the pacing. I don't think it's that slow paced, but that's probably because I have more experience with like actually like really slow paced movies. And I think
like I mean like slow paced compared to the kind of movies I usually watch.
So I think that a different movie by the same director called Goodfellas is actually like more akin to your probably. It's way more like enjoyable, and the reason like I first like was planning on maybe showing it today, but the reason we didn't was it's very long, and we kind of made this on sort of short notice. So but that's definitely a movie to keep in mind when it comes to this podcast. I might choose it sometime in the future. And yeah, that's my conclusion to Taxi Driver. And
so the next time we're gonna make this podcast, even though we're not gonna strictly what it is, but it's my turn choosing the movie next time, and I'm probably gonna take Star Trek 4, the one with the whales. I kind of forgot the title of it, but
wait, I'll look it up.
I think it's called like I think the German title is Star Trek 4 Zurück in die Gegenwart, but hold on. Star Trek 4, The Voyage Home, it's called. But this is completely...
We will post a tweet when the movie is officially locked. This so far is just speculation.
Exactly. It's just a small teaser, I would say.
All right, then we hope to see you again next time, and I hope you stick around while we still figure stuff out, what works, what doesn't work, and I hope this will become a very good podcast.
All right, goodbye.
Bye.